No. Let go. Help. It was just as I was returning from work, exhausted from overtime, that I was suddenly seized from behind in a tight grip, losing my freedom of movement. I tried to call for help, but a large hand covered and sealed my mouth. Despite desperately trying to escape, I couldn't break free from the firm grasp. Eventually, I was dragged into a dark, cramped shed in the garden. I felt my life was in danger.
Oh no.
Someone help me. Calm down, it's me. The voice of the person holding me down from behind reached my ears. Recognizing the familiar voice, I stopped resisting. I cautiously turned around, and through a slight opening in the shed door, I saw the face of my brother-in-law illuminated by the light. I'm sorry for doing this so suddenly. But this was the only way. The one restraining me was my brother-in-law. His apologetic expression was deadly serious, and it was clearly no prank or joke. Seeing that I had calmed down, he gently removed his hand from my mouth. Brother, why? It didn't seem like a joke, but I didn't understand the reason. As I asked why he had done this, a rattling noise came from outside. My brother-in-law put his finger to his lips to silence me and stared in the direction of the noise. Be quiet. They're coming. Who are they? Confused, I remained silent, and then I heard voices from the other side of the shed. I had never imagined I would hear such chilling things. I am Vanessa. I'm a 32-year-old office worker living with my husband, Patrick. I met my husband at the gym we both attended. I was struggling to use the training machine when he helped me out. He was considerate, kind, and had a charming personality, and we quickly hit it off. We were quickly drawn to each other, and it didn't take long for us to start dating. Our relationship was going smoothly. The time we spent together was enjoyable, and I naturally started to think about our future together. Patrick felt the same way, and during our dating period, he often hinted at a future together, including marriage. I vividly remember how happy I was when he actually proposed. However, our path to marriage wasn't smooth. His mother was strongly opposed not only to our marriage but even to our dating. Whenever I tried to greet her, she would refuse, saying, "I can't believe my precious son is being seduced by a woman of unknown origins. I will never approve of your marriage or even your dating." Break up with Patrick immediately. Despite being consistently rejected, I didn't give up and kept visiting with gifts. Though I was never even allowed inside the house. As months of opposition passed, various life changes like a job switch and the passing of my parents drastically altered my circumstances. As my mental resilience waned, the opposition that I had once faced head-on became increasingly difficult to bear. Patrick also seemed disheartened. I almost gave up on our relationship when, against all odds, my husband, who had once been dismissed regarding both marriage and dating, said, "I'll convince her. I promise." In the end, his mother approved our marriage. It was unbelievable. I had thought our future together was hanging by a thread, so the relief brightened my spirits. When we heard the news, we jumped for joy together. I was especially grateful that he had convinced his mother to accept me. That's how we finally embarked on our married life. However, even after our marriage, I never met his mother face to face. Our wedding involved only taking photos without a ceremony. And she said there was no need for greetings or contact. Since being driven away, I hadn't spoken a word with her. While Patrick occasionally visited his parents' house alone, I always stayed behind. Once I asked if I should greet her, but he simply replied, "It's okay." Perhaps his mother was still rejecting me. Considering the past opposition, I suspected she might not have accepted me at heart. Thinking it best not to force a greeting, we continued our peaceful life together. Then one day, we received a call from his mother. She had injured her leg and couldn't walk properly. Until then, only Patrick had been called to her house, but this time, she urgently requested my presence as well, and we headed to his parents' house together. Facing his mother for the first time in years, I felt tense. It's been a while, Mother. I'm Vanessa. My voice trembled slightly with nerves. His mother, with her leg bandaged, looked at me with the same sharp gaze she had years ago. Yes, it's been a while. I've been hearing about you from Patrick. Vanessa, I didn't accept your relationship with Patrick until now. But let's put all that behind us, shall we? She smiled as if to encourage me. Put it behind us? It was more like she had been the one rejecting from the start, but I remained silent and listened. It would be good if we could become a proper family now. Then you'll be more comfortable living here, right, Vanessa? Her tone was somewhat commanding. Was she suggesting that I move in and take care of her? Having been opposed in both marriage and dating, and having never spent much time with my mother-in-law, I didn't have a great impression of her. And now, suddenly, she was talking about living together. I couldn't easily agree. When she went to the restroom, I quietly appealed to my husband. I can't do this. I might visit occasionally, but I've never really talked to her before. And she's been opposing us for so long. I can't just start living together all of a sudden. Like during our marriage, I hoped my husband would decline for me. However, instead of showing any sign of retreat, he placed his hands on my shoulders. Don't say that, think about it. This could be a chance to deepen the relationship between you and my mother, Vanessa. You wouldn't want to keep having tensions with her, right? That might be true, but if you take care of my mother, I'm sure she will come to appreciate you more. She said she wants to let bygones be bygones, so it will be all right. She's not the same person she used to be. I'm always on your side, Vanessa, so let's try this together. Hearing this from my husband, who always tries to meet me halfway, made it even harder for me to refuse. Indeed, because of the past opposition, I didn't have a great impression of my mother-in-law. But what my husband said made sense. If I don't make an effort to reach out to my mother-in-law, our relationship will never improve. All right. Since it seems she's having trouble walking, I'll agree to live together. Thank you, Vanessa. That's just like you. Reluctantly, but reassured by my husband's support, I agreed to live with my mother-in-law. A few days after deciding to move in, we transferred all our belongings to my in-laws' house. While chuckling at the amount of stacked boxes, I stepped into the hallway to carry some unpacked items to the room. That's when I saw a man in his late 30s with a scowl, a stranger, standing at the end of the corridor. I gasped in surprise. Who could he be? Yet, certain he must be part of my husband's family. I'm Vanessa, Patrick's wife. Nice to meet you. Excuse me for asking, but may I know your name? Though I managed the greeting, before I could inquire who he was. The man merely glanced at me, gave a slight nod, and went into a room. I was left unsure of his identity. Just then, as Patrick passed by in the hallway tidying up, I quickly caught him and pointed to the door the man had entered, telling him about the incident. Patrick looked at the door with disgust. That's my brother. Your brother? I had never heard of him having a brother. He's a hopeless shut-in. I wonder how long he'll stay at home. I really wish he'd leave. It's truly a nuisance just having him here. You don't like it either, right? The brother was apparently Steve. For some reason, my husband strongly disliked him. Conversely, my mother-in-law was very fond of her shut-in son. From what my mother-in-law told me, Steve was academically and athletically gifted. Even called a prodigy, but one day, he just became a shut-in. while my mother-in-law lamented his sudden reclusion. She seemed happy to have her precious son at home and wasn't too upset about it. Steve rarely left his room. Hearing about him from both made him seem unapproachable. Being a shut-in, I seldom saw his face, and on the rare occasions I did, his expression was always stern. It felt as if he was emitting a stay-away vibe. There was something ominously difficult about him, and I couldn't help but feel frightened. After moving into my in-laws' home, just as I was getting used to the house, my mother-in-law's attitude, which initially promised to let bygones be bygones, began to change. Vanessa, the kitchen isn't cleaned up. And this cleaning here is lacking. Are you really Patrick's wife? Perhaps because of her injured leg. My mother-in-law left all the housework to me and started complaining. She had recovered enough to walk around quite a bit, but there was no sign of her doing any housework. As I also worked, it was difficult to manage perfect housekeeping every day. Despite trying to get her to understand, she would never agree. Moreover, she demanded care for her personal needs. The burden only grew, making it very hard for me. I reluctantly told my husband, "I'm too busy with work to meet your mother's daily housekeeping standards." His response was not supportive. "That's your fault, Vanessa. No wonder my mother is upset. Do better next time." Despite his promise to work together, it was always me who ended up caring for his mother in place of my increasingly overtime-bound husband. The housework we used to share seemed to be ignored by him under his mother's influence. The husband who had promised to be on my side had, at some point, started siding with his mother. But it wasn't just that. "You haven't finished folding the laundry again. You're useless, Vanessa. Give me money. Now." "What? Money? Why?" "It's a penalty for not being able to do the housework and making my mother angry. You deserve a penalty since you didn't manage." My income was confiscated by my husband for not managing the housework well. I only received the bare minimum for living expenses. My mother-in-law and husband used my confiscated money to buy whatever they wanted and indulged in luxuries. Meanwhile, I was forced to live frugally. My husband wasn't originally like this, but now any trace of his former kindness was gone. Yet, I still wanted to believe in him. I thought maybe he was just temporarily influenced by his mother, and that he would return to his old self. Holding on to that belief, I continued to do the various household chores after my mother-in-law and husband had gone to bed. One night, as I was washing up in the kitchen, Steve appeared in the dimly lit hallway.
Ah.
"Brother-in-law. Sorry, it's late at night. Did I disturb you?" I was inwardly startled by the rare encounter. Although I had tried to be as quiet as possible, I worried I might have woken him. "No, it's fine. Don't worry about it." That was the first time I heard Steve's voice. Until then, it had just been nods of acknowledgement, so I was surprised he could speak. With a low, calm voice, he took a drink from the fridge and returned to his room. Though we rarely spoke and he still had an unapproachable dark aura, I didn't think he was as bad as my husband hated. Maybe it was because I unconsciously compared him to my nagging mother-in-law and the husband who had lost his kindness. I felt a strange relief being able to talk normally, and I continued my chores. A few days later, one morning when I had to leave home earlier than usual for work, I hurriedly finished preparing breakfast. "Vanessa, could you organize this shelf for me? I want to put in some new magazines I bought. And clean it up a bit while you're at it. Please do it now." As she spoke, my mother-in-law pointed to a bookshelf crammed haphazardly with books and files. A shelf she always managed carelessly. It would take a decent amount of time to organize. However, the clock was ticking towards the time I needed to leave for work. I really didn't have the time. I'm sorry, I have to go to work now. I'll take care of the bookshelf when I get back. I don't care about your job. I'm in trouble here, can you organize it now? Reluctantly, as I tried to decline, my mother-in-law became angry, urging me to hurry. She could easily do the organizing herself. But it was I who was truly inconvenienced by her unreasonable demands. Even as I prepared for work, she continued to grumble and make snide remarks. Not wanting to upset her further, I asked my husband, who had a later start, to take care of the shelf. However, his response was not pleasant. That's a job your mother asked you to do. If you didn't have time, you should have woken up earlier. Don't push your failures onto me, okay? My husband rebuked me with a displeased look, acting as if he knew nothing of the matter. My mother-in-law's foot had healed a while back, and he still had time before he needed to leave. He could have easily helped his own mother. Why was he being so unreasonable? My mother-in-law continued to press, just do it quickly. And my husband blamed me for not waking up earlier. It was almost time for me to leave. I'm really sorry, but I must go now. I promise I'll do it when I get back. I really don't have time right now, so excuse me. Regardless of what they said, I had to go to work, so I rushed out of the house, escaping from them. Hey, Vanessa. Are you abandoning your family responsibilities? Wait. What is with that attitude? For a daughter-in-law. Their angry voices followed me even as the front door slammed shut. The hurtful words they had said haunted me all the way to work. Worn down from the morning's stresses and focusing my attention on my work, I returned home late at night after a long day of overtime. The imposing sight of my in-laws' house loomed before me. I dreaded to think how much housework had piled up. Once I opened the front door, I would be berated by those two again. I was so reluctant to return home that I didn't immediately reach for the door. Instead, I took a moment outside to breathe deeply and organize my thoughts. I decided to behave as usual once I got back. Just as I was calming my mind. What? Suddenly, I was seized from behind and my freedom was restricted. My eyes widened in shock, and for a moment I was voiceless. No. Let go. Help. I managed to squeeze out a cry for help, but before I could shout loudly, someone's hand covered and sealed my mouth from behind. Despite my desperate attempts to escape, I couldn't get away because I was firmly grasped. Finally, I was forcibly dragged backwards and shoved into a dark, cramped, large shed in the garden. There was someone behind me. What to do? I didn't want to be attacked. It's me, calm down. The calm, low voice of the person restraining me stopped my struggle. Cautiously, I turned around, and through a slight opening in the shed door, I saw my brother-in-law's face illuminated by the moonlight. I'm sorry for doing this so suddenly. But there was no other way. I won't do anything more, so please trust me and calm down. His face was dead serious. It didn't seem like a joke or a prank, and as I calmed my racing heart, I stopped resisting and he gently removed his hand from my mouth. Brother, why? While his seriousness was apparent, I didn't understand why he would do something like this. Just as I asked him, a rattling noise came from outside. It was coming from the direction of the house. My brother-in-law put his finger to his lips to silence me, then stared in the direction of the noise. Be quiet. They're coming. They? As instructed, I stayed silent, and soon I could hear voices speaking from behind the door. I thought I heard a noise, maybe it's just my imagination. She should be coming home soon, but she's late. Really, Vanessa is worthless, especially at times like this. Once she gets back, we'll tie her up and make her listen. I'm so tired of dealing with her. Let's just get it over with. My husband and mother-in-law. Tie her up and make her listen. I knew they were talking about me, but what exactly were they planning? A cold sweat ran down my face. We'll catch her off guard as soon as she gets back, she'll be off her guard then. I know, we have to be careful not to let our guard down. We finally approved your marriage for this reason, right? Make sure she can't resist when we. Hearing their conversation, I was horrified. My husband and mother-in-law were plotting something truly dreadful. My mind raced with panic. If I had gone home as usual, I might have been in mortal danger. Let's go inside and confirm the plan again. It's not good if someone hears us outside. At my husband's suggestion, the two of them went inside the house. I heard the front door close, and quietly, I stepped out of the shed with my brother-in-law. My heart was pounding unpleasantly. Relieved that we hadn't been found, but still distressed by their terrifying conversation. I knew that if those two caught us, it wouldn't end well. I'm really sorry for having such a mother and brother. I'm ashamed as your brother-in-law to have put you in danger like this. With his voice hushed, my brother-in-law deeply apologized. I shook my head frantically. No, it's not your fault, brother. If anything, I owe you my life, thank you. But why were they saying such things? I'll tell you what I know later. Right now, we need to focus on getting out of here. Once Mom and Patrick are asleep, Vanessa, you need to escape as soon as possible. Despite being tormented, I had no recollection of them ever threatening my life. My brother-in-law's expression hardened, and he said, "Talking here increases the risk of them finding out." He was right. It was time to escape. We exchanged contact information and quietly entered the house once the lights were off. With my brother-in-law's help, I managed to gather the bank books that had been taken from me and packed a minimal amount of belongings to safely escape from the house. I rented a vacant hotel room and took the next day off work. Early in the morning, I received messages from my husband and mother-in-law saying, "It's shameful not to return home. Come back immediately." I ignored both. Finally settling down, I contacted my brother-in-law. After briefly updating him on my situation, he was relieved to hear I had escaped safely. When I asked what was really going on, he replied sternly, "Actually, I accidentally overheard Mom and Patrick talking about targeting your assets." Targeting my assets? But my salary had been confiscated by my husband and mother-in-law. That must be a mistake. My salary was confiscated. Wasn't there something else? Perhaps a large inheritance from your parents. They were targeting that. His words made me realize something. Indeed, there was another bank account. It contained a large inheritance from my deceased parents. They had been targeting that inheritance. According to my brother-in-law, Patrick had discovered my parents' inheritance while we were dating. And he used it to persuade my mother-in-law, who had been strongly against our marriage. Blinded by the prospect of inheritance, my husband and mother-in-law conspired. They pretended to be on my side to marry me, then planned to take every last bit of the inheritance. I felt a darkness before my eyes. Neither my kind husband nor the approving mother-in-law had ever existed. It was all a sham to seize the inheritance. I'm really sorry for having such a terrible family. Actually, the reason I became a recluse was also because of family issues. He had been interfered with by his mother in his career and marriage prospects. His desired job was ruined by his mother's daily complaints to the company, claiming it wasn't suitable, and his potential wife was harassed persistently. Constantly demeaned by his brother, my brother-in-law lost hope and secluded himself at home. But this incident has been a wake-up call. If I stay under the roof of a parent who could harm their son's wife, I'll end up ruined too. I'm going to leave home, inspired by you, Vanessa. His voice sounded determined. Fortunately, as a former prodigy, my brother-in-law had talents that would make employment easy. And he had been receiving some passive income, which he partially gave to his mother. Apparently, my husband had been jealous of his brother, who was not only talented but also favored by their mother from a young age. I will also take steps to cut ties with my husband and mother-in-law. Please take care too, brother-in-law. I needed to settle things soon. With resolve, I ended the call and headed to the city hall to pick up a divorce form. It was the first step in separating myself from them. After living in the hotel for a few days, I set up a new home and went to work daily. I still received messages from my husband and mother-in-law, but I ignored them all. However, an incident occurred. Frustrated by not being able to contact me, my mother-in-law and husband actually stormed into my workplace. That woman has run off with our precious money. Vanessa is here, right? Let me talk to her. Your money is my money. Let me set the account for the salary deposit. Upon entering the company, they started causing chaos, knocking over plants and banging on walls, demanding me to come out. Their disgraceful behavior was more embarrassing than frightening. Unable to leave things as they were, I managed to calm them down for the moment and, with permission from my boss, arranged a meeting in the conference room. Since the situation might become unmanageable alone, I asked my boss, who had been supportive when my parents died, to be present. He kindly agreed. In front of my indignant husband and mother-in-law, I presented the divorce papers. Please sign the divorce papers. I will not return to you. I had always carried the pre-filled divorce form, ready for my husband to sign at any moment. After I stated this clearly, my husband scoffed at me. Divorce? Ridiculous. You can't just run off with our money and expect a divorce. Do you think you can escape? I'll start from scratch and fix you. He banged the table and spoke angrily. I was not intimidated by his demeanor. The money you forcibly took from me isn't your income, Patrick. Besides, the money given to me was minimal. After all this, do you think you're the ones who are justified? So what? Money between spouses is shared. No matter how firmly I spoke, my husband and mother-in-law seemed unfazed, dodging the issue without any sign of regret, refusing to sign the divorce papers. I know everything. Even your plans to take the inheritance. My husband and mother-in-law flinched. How do you know about that? Their faces seemed to say, remembering their dirty scheme to seize the inheritance. Shall I file the divorce or call the police? Which would you prefer? Calling the police is an exaggeration. Yes, it's an exaggeration. It's Vanessa's fault for running away. They still tried to justify themselves. I was astonished by their terrible gracelessness. My boss, unable to stand their twisted smiles, sighed deeply. Sir, madam. From what I've heard, what you're doing is not acceptable by any societal standards. What do you mean by barging into the company like this? It shows a lack of common sense. We could even call the police for your unauthorized entry. When the boss, who has a stern and imposing presence, threatened to call the police, both my husband and mother-in-law turned pale. There were no more excuses to be made. It seemed that my husband also felt this as he frantically scratched at his hair, sweat dripping down his face. Fine, I get it. I'll sign, okay? My husband grabbed the pen roughly and signed the divorce papers with sloppy handwriting. Muttering complaints, he kicked his chair and stormed out of the conference room. In a panic, my mother-in-law also hurried out. I apologized to my boss for the trouble caused by my family, to which he responded with a smile. It's okay. You can always rely on me. I was very grateful for his support. At least, I had obtained the signed divorce papers. I felt relieved now that I could finally walk the path of disengagement. Later, I decided to ask a lawyer to demand compensation from my husband. Actually, my brother-in-law had informed me that he had caught my husband cheating. The other woman was younger, and apparently, my husband had been visiting a hotel with her on the days he lied about working overtime. This explained the increase in his so-called overtime. Since I no longer felt love for him, I wasn't disappointed. All the resentment was towards my husband, who left all the housework and care of his mother to me while taking away my money and enjoying himself freely. The compensation was minimal, as it was based on his fault in the divorce. But he seemed displeased just to be asked for it. What the hell, compensation? Vanessa has no right to demand such a thing from me. You were the one who cheated. Just pay the compensation, please. Huh? A little cheating is fine. You're being too narrow-minded. Withdraw the compensation right now. Was he even aware of what he had done? His selfish remarks were chilling. The lawyer, standing beside me, mentioned, "You should be thankful to Vanessa. The compensation could have been much higher." Reluctantly, not wanting to increase the amount any further, my husband backed down. "Please make sure the payment is processed. And from now on, please stay away from me for various safety reasons." Hinting at their earlier plots with my words. My husband silently grimaced as if he had bitten into something bitter. I looked at him with a cold gaze, feeling it was only natural. If they targeted me again, it would be unbearable. The lawyer nodded in agreement, and we decided to issue a restraining order against my husband and mother-in-law. Soon after, I received a call from my brother-in-law. It seemed he had successfully escaped from the family home. Thanks to his reclusive behavior, he was able to leave smoothly without being noticed. 2 days after his escape, my mother-in-law, in a frenzy upon realizing he was gone, called me. "Steve has disappeared. It's your fault, you must have instigated him." I responded calmly to her ranting over the phone. "I haven't done anything. Isn't it because of your overbearing interference that your son has left? Moreover, you should keep your promise not to approach me. The lawyer has told you that you must not come near me." After I sharply put her in her place, my enraged mother-in-law lost her momentum and fell silent. I hung up the phone and blocked her number. I would never disclose my brother-in-law's whereabouts. She should reflect on her own actions. Sometime later, I learned that my husband had intended to marry his affair partner and had brought her to the family home. However, tired of the lack of money and the incessant nagging from my mother-in-law, she eventually broke off the relationship with him. Likely, they hadn't saved enough because they were counting on my inheritance. My mother-in-law and husband are living together, but because they used to splurge with my income, they've developed a habit of wasteful spending and can't seem to lower their standard of living. Apparently, they impulsively buy unnecessary things and are struggling financially. Moreover, since they lost me, who acted much like a housekeeper, they hardly do any housework and live lazily. As a result, their home has turned into a garbage dump. Feeling weakened by their deteriorating living conditions, my husband made a desperate plea. I was wrong. "Can we start over?" However, using the restraining order as a shield, I immediately refused and blocked his calls. I will never forget their attempt to harm me for my inheritance. The family home had become decrepit, with weeds overgrowing in the garden and a gloomy atmosphere, making it known in the neighborhood as a haunted house. Meanwhile, my brother-in-law and I celebrated our newfound freedom. "Thank you, Vanessa. Thanks to you, I can start over in life." Released physically and emotionally, my brother-in-law seemed softer in demeanor. He was my comrade in escaping that house. Now, neither of us was bound to that place anymore. Steve and I had taken the first steps towards leading our own free lives.